I'm on my way home from work, and it's been a lovely day at the university. I went through to work in my car today because I had to take some stuff through that I couldn't fit on my Vespa. And I must say, traveling in a car is such a cool thing when you're used to being on a bike every day. It feels a little bit like sitting in your lounge and getting from place to place, but it's fantastic. Now, the issue that I want to talk about today is something which is quite important in Christian theology, and this is the notion of eschatological hope. Now, that's quite a big term, but hopefully I'll be able to unpack it during today's vlog. Now, the person who I think has written most clearly about this is a theologian called Jurgen Moltmann. And Moltmann's Theology of Hope is a very interesting theology, because the point that Jurgen Moltmann makes is that Christians need to hold on to hope and not just optimism. So for Christians, the value to hold on to is a hope that surpasses just mere history. Now, let's illustrate it in this way. Optimism is something that you get by having data points. So for example, if you have a positive data point number 1, positive data point number 2, positive data point number 3, so if good things consistently start happening, you have a fairly good reason, it's reasonable to be optimistic about what data point 4 and 5 and 6 will be like. Moltmann, on the other hand, says that for Christians, the thing that we need to recognize is, because we believe in a God who is active in history, and because we believe that ultimately at the end of history, in the fullness of time, in the eschaton, when everything comes to its fullness, what is known in popular theology as the end times, Moltmann believes that in that eschaton, the hope of God will have been realized. A little bit like what we read in Revelation 21, that one day there will be a day where the tears wiped from everyone's eyes, where there is no more pain or death or gnashing of teeth. What we read in Isaiah, that the weapons will be beaten into plowshares, that the lion will lie down with the lamb. What in the Old Testament is known as the eternal shalom. Now, for Christians, this means that we pray as if everything depends on God, and we act as if everything depends on us. But we do not lose hope when the situation in which we find ourselves historically, or the concrete reality in which we find ourselves, does not reflect that hope completely today. Why? Because we know that we are not the only social actors in history. All of history does not depend on who we are and what we can do. And this for me is a very interesting thing. I think that more and more Christians need to hold on to this truth, that God is active in history, and that we live not by optimism, but we live by hope. So that's my little thought for today. Remember, it's not a lecture, it's just a thought. And if you're interested in reading a little bit more about this, I'll link an article that I wrote called What Hope Is There for South Africa, thinking specifically about this realized eschatology, how we should live in the present if we believe that God's eschatological hope will dawn on the earth, how we can participate with God in the inevitable justice and goodness and mercy of creation. I'll stick a link to that in the notes below. And I'd love to hear your feedback. Just to say, by the way, the one thing that we should never do is deny history. It doesn't mean that history doesn't matter. In fact, the incarnation shows us that God cares very much about history, cares very much about our lives. Jesus comes to live amongst us, to be like us. But it just means that history does not contain all of reality. That there is a reality that is greater than history, and that at any moment, as John de Gruchy, the great South African theologian, puts it, at any moment we may see the God of the unexpected break through and do something truly wonderful. So if you want to read a little bit more about this, I'll share my paper, and of course I'll encourage you to go and read Jurgen Moltmann's work, which is wonderfully written, and he's a wonderful theologian of hope. So I end with a little quote. It comes from the Brazilian liberation theologian Rubem Alvez, who says that hope is hearing the melody of the future and faith is to dance to it. So I don't know about you, I can hear the melody of God's future, and that gives me hope in order to live differently in the world today. So it's been wonderful to get some feedback. My goodness, it's really great to see that people are watching the videos and engaging with me on the topics. And some of the feedback that I've been getting has been asking questions about the theology, but also some questions about how I record these vlogs. So let me say just quickly, the short answer to that is I record them on the fly. My days are fairly full. I don't have a lot of time to sit down and record and edit, but I have a Sony RX100 camera, the Mark I. It's still the very first one. You'll notice if you look in the bottom right hand of the screen that there's a little black spot. That's a dust mite. So my camera is imperfect, and that's actually the way I like it. One of the questions I had from someone is, how do you sustain a single thought for so long? Well, I suppose as someone who was trained in preaching, I am a Methodist minister by training, that learning to sustain a single thought is quite an important thing. But the truth is, I don't always sustain the thought. This friend asked, do I re-record the videos? And the answer is actually I don't. I take one shot at it, and whatever is there, that's generally what gets posted. And the fact that it's not perfect is actually quite cool. That's the way I like it. You know, the problem is, if you're going to post a perfect video, it needs to be perfect. But if people understand that it's just a thought, not a lecture, and that it's not entirely perfect, they're willing to watch it, and it's quite cool. And I think the imperfections are what make it absolutely unique. So if you've got a question or a comment, or you'd like to add something, then please send me a note, and I'll gladly respond to it when I get a chance. If you're enjoying the vlog, I'd like to invite you please to subscribe, and every time that I post a new video, you'll be notified, or you'll get it automatically in your YouTube feed. If any of the vlogs make sense to you, then please share them with others. And if ever you've got any questions, or you'd like to engage in a discussion around any of these issues, by all means drop me a comment below. And please like the video. You can also connect with me on my website, which is www.dionforster.com, or connect with me on Instagram or Twitter @DigitalDion, or on Beam @DigitalDion. Thanks for watching, and there should be another vlog fairly soon.